If you have a Rust server and a Discord server, allow me to introduce you to UltimateRcon+, one of the most comprehensive Discord bots I've ever seen. But if you don't have either a Rust server or a Discord server, I highly suggest you run over to icehost.com and pick up a Rust server and head on over to discord.gg to get your very own Discord server. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Rust Admin Academy, where I'm teaching you everything that you need to know about owning and operating a successful Rust server. On this channel, I do plugin reviews and tutorials, plus I want to give you all of the tips and tools that are going to make your Rust server ownership so much easier. If you're brand new to my channel, consider subscribing so that you stay up to date on everything that we're working on and to get the latest updates on the Rust development world. I'll remind you a couple of times throughout the video to hit that like button if you're enjoying what you're watching, so please remember to do so. All right, let's get on to today's video. Alright, so I've been playing around with UltimateRcon+ for a couple of days now so that I can bring you the latest and greatest information so that you can decide if this is right for your community. So I'm going to go over some of the features of this bot and why I think you should have it, and then I'll briefly get into how to set it up. So normally I would go through each individual line of a configuration file to show you exactly what you need to do in order to make this work for your community. However, after having done this already for myself several times, I realized very quickly that Amino has set this bot up in a way that I know you're not going to run into any issues. And if by some freak chance you do run into an issue, just let me know in the comment section down below. Or of course, you can hit me up in my Discord, discord.srtbull.com. It's also important to note that this Discord bot is self-hosted, which can be a little bit misleading. It means you're going to need to head over to your local Discord bot hosting company and pick one up if you don't have a spare one kicking around. My suggestion is icehost.com. Amino, the author of this bot, suggests pebblehost.com. It's important to note that this bot does require Node.js 17.7 to be installed on your Discord bot, which basically means at the time of the recording of this video that icehost.com is not a good option, at least until they update to Node.js 17.7. Alternatively to paying for a host, you can host this bot locally on your local network or a dedicated server, whatever you might have access to. I'm not going to get into any of those details on this video. Just remember that Node.js 17.7 is the bare minimum that you have to have running on that bot. So the bot that you're going to be seeing on this video is actually hosted on my local network, mainly because the bot that I had set up for this video flopped out on me. Whatever, that's a long story, doesn't really matter. I was basically left in a situation where I had to find a solution and I had to find it quickly, so local host it was. So let's go over some of the features of UltimateRcon+. But before I get into all of that, you're probably thinking to yourself, haven't you already done a video on UltimateRcon? And the answer to that, of course, is yes, I have. This, however, is UltimateRcon+, which takes all of the original features of UltimateRcon and adds a whole plethora of new features that we can now use. And over and above what I'm going to be talking about on today's video, Amino has informed me that there's already features that he's working on that he's planning on implementing very, very soon. So I'm just going to start at the top of the list and work my way down of all of the different features of UltimateRcon+. So first and foremost is a leaderboard. So you can have a leaderboard for the players of your community that shows their kills, their deaths, and of course their KDR, kill-death ratio. So you can have a global leaderboard, which is a leaderboard that keeps track of all of the players on all of your different servers. Now, if you only have one server, this is going to be redundant because you can have a leaderboard just for each individual server as well. So this one right here that you're seeing on my screen is my global leaderboard. It's showing information from all three of the different servers that this bot is monitoring, whereas this one right here is just for one specific server. You can also have a server stats display, which shows players that are currently on your server, players that are joining, and players that are queued. It also shows the last wipe date. And this also automatically updates about every 10 seconds or so. Another really cool feature that I don't have a screen that I can show you is UltimateRcon+ will actually build and maintain a database. So everything that this bot is recording, it's being recorded into a database. And there is an important feature which I will show you once we go into the details of the configuration file. Some people hear database and they get all freaked out because not everyone knows how to operate a database. Don't worry, Amino has made this super simple. There's also an F7 counter. So what that does is it keeps track of all of the players that are submitting F7 reports, as well as the number of times a player is getting an F7 report against them. And the reason why this is important is, let's say you have somebody on your server that literally reports every little thing that goes wrong with every single player that they ever come across. Well, obviously they're being a little bit too sensitive to the situation. They're just F7 reporting everything. So you can have the bot set up in a way that it actually ignores the F7 reports coming from that player. Alternatively, the same thing goes for people that are having reports sent against them. So let's say you have somebody really experienced on your player and they're really good at PvP, and there's a lot of players out there that are just F7 reporting them because let's say they get headshots from too far away or too many kills too easily, whatever. They're just a really skilled player and they keep getting F7 reports sent against them. well, you can ignore that player as well. There's also a watch list feature. So let's say that you have a player in your community that you want to be alerted, or you want your Discord staff to be alerted every time they log into your server. You can add their Steam 64 ID to a watch list, and it will alert anybody that you specify every time they log onto your server. So as you can see here, I added a bunch of players to my watch list, and the bot alerted me every time they logged onto the server. Now, I just did this for example purposes. This person isn't doing anything wrong or anything like that. I just wanted to have something to show you for this video. Now, similarly to the original Ultimate Archon, we also have Archon access directly in our Discord, if you set it up that way. So if you want your Archon to be scrolling through in your Discord, you can definitely do that. You can set up what information it sends and what information it ignores. But the important thing that I want you to recognize here is no longer do we have to use slash commands to actually send commands from our Discord that will actually take effect in our Rust server. You can now just write commands normally as you would as if you were chatting directly, and it will implement those commands. Now, obviously they have to be valid commands. You can't make up things and expect that to work, but the commands that you would directly use on your console, you can now do directly from your Discord. And on the original Ultimate Archon, you had to use slash commands in order to do that. This one you don't. And the same thing can be said about chatting directly from your Discord into your Rust server. You used to have to use slash commands in order to send messages from your Discord into your Rust server. Now you can just chat like you normally would. As you can see here, I was having a conversation with the players in my server, and I was just typing the words in normally. I wasn't sending them using slash commands. So those are just some of the current features that differentiates Ultimate Archon from Ultimate Archon+. There's going to be more features coming in the very near future, and hopefully I can cover those once those details are actually released to the public. Now, like I've said a couple of times already, there is some overlap between Plus and the original Ultimate Archon. So with Ultimate Archon Plus, you can still have your bot status showing the number of players on your server or the last wipe date if you set it up that way. You still have a global bot status, which shows the population of all of the servers that you have this bot monitoring. You still have the dynamic population changer, which will automatically change the number of player slots that are available on your server based on how many players that are currently on there right now. It still has Discord wipe announcements. So every time you wipe your server, the bot is going to display that information in the Discord. The bot will still check players that are connecting to your server to see if they have a private Steam profile. And if they do, it's going to report that to Discord. It'll also check all of the players that are joining your servers, whether they have a VAC ban, EIC ban, or a temp ban. And based on how you have that set up in your configuration file, it'll block them from joining your server as well as sending you a report in Discord. We still have global chat as well as team chat. We still have two-way chat, which I've already talked about a little bit. We've got the leave and join logs. We've got a kill feed, which now covers all different types of kills and deaths. We've got a private messages log, providing of course you're using the private messages plugin from UMod, and the F7 reports as well as the server message logs. So all of those last features there you get in the original Ultimate Archon as well as Ultimate Archon Plus. So you're not losing any features if you decide to go to Ultimate Archon Plus, but I definitely understand if you did already buy Ultimate Archon, it might be a little bit challenging to pay for Ultimate Archon Plus. I totally understand that. In my opinion, Ultimate Archon Plus would be worth the upgrade. I'd like to see Amino do some sort of a, like if you bought the original, maybe you get a good deal on the Ultimate Archon Plus. I'm not really sure, and I definitely can't speak for him. It just would be a suggestion of mine. But it is important to note that Amino is keeping and maintaining the original Ultimate Archon, so it's still going to be available and still maintained. After all, you obviously paid for it, so it's important that it stays current. All right, so let's dive into some of the technical side of things. I'm going to show you a little bit about the configuration files just so that you're kind of comfortable on how that's going to look. So here we are halfway through this video, and I haven't even talked about price yet. So head on over to CodeFlea. I'm going to put a link to it in the video description down below. It is a $20 bot, and once you've purchased your bot, click on the green download button. It's going to prompt you to decide whether you're using this on a Windows setup or a Linux setup. And like I said, I'm doing this on my local host, so I'm doing this in a Windows environment. But these steps that you're about to see are going to look very, very similar. So once you have your files downloaded, obviously you're going to extract them to their current location, and then we can delete the original zip file. And that's it. This is all of the files that you need for your bot to operate. But from this point, there's only two things that I need you to pay attention to. So there's the config.json as well as the server folders. Let's start with the config.json. So this is obviously a default configuration file. And hopefully by looking at it, you'll see why I didn't actually want to use my real live information. There's just too much information in here that I didn't want to have to go in and change after this video was recorded. So the config.json is basically taking care of like all of the global settings. So the global bot that you're going to have running in your server. And this is basically where we get to decide which features we're going to use and which ones we aren't. So right at the very top, we're going to define which Discord server we want this bot to be operating in. And that's obviously defined by Discord server ID. And then we need our Steam API key. Now, if Amino had been listening to me, he would have pre-populated that information in there so that you can just take that link to get your Steam API key. I'll also take this opportunity to tell you how important it is that that information is not shared with anybody ever for any reason. Once your Steam API key is in there, do not let anybody access this file because they can do some real sketchy stuff with your Steam API key. So the global pop bot. So you need to make a decision. Do you have multiple Rust servers that you want the global pop bot to be monitoring and keeping track of how many players are across all of your servers? If you only have one server, you can leave this feature set to false and change it down the road if you decide that you're going to run more than one server. If you do currently have more than one server, then obviously you get to determine what information is going to be displayed underneath your global pop status. Once we're done with that, we get to decide what other features we want this bot to actually do. So we've got the option for a player profiler, which I haven't shown you yet. So let's do that right now. So with your player profiler bot enabled, you can actually pull up a card of information about specific players. So this one is just mine and there's no information there to be had, but you can get a sense of what kind of information can be shown on a player's profile card. And you can also define down here who actually has the ability to pull up a player's profile. So you can set this up so that only staff can do it or only members of your Discord server can do it. But you would need to define Discord role IDs here in order to allow specific people or specific roles to be able to actually pull up a player's profile card. My apologies, I just realized that I didn't have that in dark mode and I should have. So the next thing is the global leaderboard. Do we want to have this enabled or not? And again, if you only have one server, having a global leaderboard probably doesn't make any sense because you can have an individual leaderboard for your singular server. Here we get to define whether we're going to actually utilize the stats command on our server and who can actually use that command. So if you only wanted moderators to be able to pull up a stats profile on a specific player, then you would put that moderator's role ID in that location right there. If you have another role on your server that you would also like to be able to run the stats command, and this goes for all of these different features, you would put that secondary role in there. You can have as many roles as you want. Just note that these placeholders here are showing you the syntax to have more than one. It's also important to note that you don't want to leave this role ID placeholder in there. You want to put something in there or take out that section. So if you only have one role ID on your Discord server that you want to be able to use this command, we could just put that role ID in there just like that and delete the rest of this so that it looks just like that. With the watch list settings, we get to determine whether we want to utilize that functionality, and we get to determine who can actually add or remove players from the watch list, as well as who is going to be alerted when that player on the watch list actually logs onto your server. So this line is who can maintain the watch list, and the alert roles is obviously who is going to be alerted once a player actually triggers that watch list. So the F7 player settings, this is where we get to determine who in your Discord server or what role in your Discord server has the ability to ignore the F7 reports that are coming in. Now, obviously you wouldn't want just anybody to be able to add themselves to an ignore list. So obviously you would want your staff, your moderators, your admins, whatever senior management you have going on in your server. Or if it happens to just be yourself, you would obviously want to have your role ID there and nobody else's. So just before we're finished with this config.json and move into the server folder, something that's important that I need you to recognize is anytime you see something that looks like this, where it's asking for a bot token, or you might see later on an application ID, that means you're going to need to go to the Discord developers portal, which I have covered in previous videos. In fact, I'll put a link to it in the top right-hand corner, and create an actual bot where you would put that information in there. The other important thing that you might notice is sometimes one of these features might be looking for a webhook. So it's important that you're paying attention to that as well. And anytime the config is asking for a webhook, you give it that information. I've also covered all of that in a previous video. And once we're satisfied with all of the features that we've set up in the config.json, we can save this, close it, and go into the servers folder. So going back to where our original files are, let's go into the servers folder. So now Amino has set this up with two pre-configured server files. It is important to note that you can have as many server files in here as you want, as long as they each have their own individual name right here. And server 1, server 2 is just a placeholder. You can change that to whatever you want it to be. So obviously these two files are exactly the same. And if you wanted to have more, you could just copy pasta each one of these for as many servers as you want. So let's just go into server 1 and have a look at what this is all about. Now, when you first open this up, this can be a little bit overwhelming. There's a lot of information in here, but if you just go through it step by step, it's actually not too bad. Trust me, like I said before, I've done this 3 or 4 times now. So the server enabled toggle is actually an important feature, and I'm glad Amino put that in there. So as you noticed a minute ago, I just copy pasted that server file over and over and over. But let's say I wasn't ready to actually be reporting from those servers. I can go into each one of those files and change this to false and the bot will ignore all of the information that's in here. So like I said, just go through this line by line. I'm going to point out a couple of important features that I don't want you to miss out on, but for the most part, it's pretty simple. So we're going to give this file a server name. So whatever server we're getting all of the information for this configuration file, obviously we would put the name of that server there. This server special ID is what I was referring to earlier when we were talking about databases. It doesn't have to be really complicated, and you can put whatever name you want in here. You just want to make sure that each one of your servers that you have this bot monitoring has a different special server ID there. Like I said, you can put whatever name you want in there. Just make sure that there's no spaces in that identifier. You'll want to head over to Battlemetrics and get your server ID for your server. And then obviously the basic information for your server, the IP address, the Archon port, the game port, as well as the Archon password. Again, make sure you're not sharing that information with anybody ever for any reason. And here we're being prompted for another bot token and client ID. That information is all available from the Discord developers portal, which again, I've covered on other videos. You have a bit of an important decision here. It's whether you want to create a different bot for each individual job that is being asked for in these configuration files. And in my opinion, yes, you want to have an individual bot doing a specific job. Can you use one bot doing multiple jobs? Yes, of course you can. I just don't recommend it because you start running into rate limiting issues and then your bot stops working, it freaks out, it panics, it doesn't know what to do, it has too much information, blah, 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 blah. My suggestion is anytime you see a new area where it's asking for a bot token or a client ID, something like that, that is your prompt to go to the Discord developers portal and create another bot. Do we want to have a leaderboard for this specific server, true or false? Do we want to have a server status page for this specific server, true or false? Do we want to have wipe announcements for this specific server, true or false? And then of course, what do we want that to look like? And if you want to display a picture of the map and you have a Rust Maps API key, of course that information would go right there. And if you don't have a Rust Maps API key, you would want to go over and set up an account at rustmaps.com and then you can get your API key. So here we get to decide whether we want to maintain a chat log for this specific server. If we do, we change this to true. We put in the webhook for the channel where we want to actually have this chat going to. And then of course you can change the color of what that embed looks like. And the same thing can be said about every single feature in there. You can change what all of the colors are. Team chat logs, same thing. Local chat logs, true or false. This section is really only applicable if you're running your server in hardcore mode. And then the Discord to in-game messages. So what channels do you want this chat to be allowed in? What role do you want to be able to actually chat back and forth between your Discord and your Rust server? And then of course what that formatting of that chat actually looks like. Here we're going to determine if we're going to be using the auto mute feature of this bot. And if we are, we have to be using Better Chat Mute available from UMod. And then we need to determine how it's actually going to function. So first of all, we're going to make it true. We're going to utilize this feature. We need to determine if we're going to be watching team chat as well as global chat, true or false. If we leave this at false, it obviously just monitors global chat. If we change this to true, obviously it monitors team chat as well. And then we get to determine what words are actually going to trigger the auto mute feature. Now, this gets into some sketchy areas on YouTube, and I'm not going to censor any of this out, but you all know what kind of information you can put in here. And then for how long is the mute going to be for? What's the reason for the mute? Do you want to log that action, true or false? And if you are logging it, here's another opportunity for a webhook so that we can put that information in a specific channel in your Discord. Now the dynamic max players change, I've covered this on a previous video, so I'm not going to go into a lot of depth on this, but it basically just means that once your player count reaches a certain threshold, the bot will either increase or decrease the number of player slots that are available on your server. So if you have it set up on your server so that once your player count reaches 20 players, the bot can automatically increase your available player slots to 30 or 50 or whatever works for your community. And you can also do the same thing for the number of available slots in the queue. Here we get to decide how the Archon reporting is going to work. And like I said before, you can actually have it reporting all of the different lines of your Archon directly to your Discord. I don't recommend doing that, but you certainly can if you want to. If you do decide to do it, you're going to see why I suggest you don't do it. So you can enable this feature if you're going to. You can tell the bot which lines you want to ignore from that Archon, stuff that you don't really care about. And this section here was talking about the ability to actually send Archon commands, whether you have your Archon reporting turned on or not. We can determine which roles in our Discord server is actually allowed to send commands to our Rust server, and of course in which channel they're allowed to do that in. Same thing as before, if you only have one role ID or one channel ID that you want to have this information in, just take that extra information out or put those IDs IDs in there twice. You don't ever want to have your configuration file still say role ID or channel ID there. You either want to get rid of that section or put something in there that makes sense. You can have the bot notify your Discord when the server goes offline, or of course when it comes back online. Turn these features to true if you want to utilize this functionality. Put in your webhook information so that this information is reported to a specific channel in your Discord. You can change the image that gets shown here because Amino takes this opportunity to promote his stuff. Obviously, you'd want to change that to something more indicative of your server as opposed to promoting Amino's servers. Same thing for the offline functionality. So here we get to determine what status is going to be below the bot that we've now created for this specific server. So like I said before, I have 3 different servers that I have my bot monitoring. So I had to go in and create a bot for each one of those individual servers. So as you can see here, we're deciding what information is actually going to be displayed as the status for each one of those different servers. You also have the option of having that bot status say, come join wipe today for a specific length of time after a fresh wipe. So obviously, if you want that functionality, change that to true, determine for how long you want to actually have that message up on there. And then after that time expires, it'll go back to showing the number of players that are on your server instead of saying, come join this server. It just wiped. Now here's where we get into the really fun stuff. This is the important information that determines the degenerates that might be coming into your server. So we can be checking players as they're trying to enter your server, whether they have bans on their record. We can determine how many bans we're going to allow and for what length of time since their last ban. And if they trigger any one of these thresholds, then obviously they won't be permitted into the server. But we can also send a report mentioning a specific role in a specific channel, letting you know that somebody that didn't meet this threshold didn't get into your server. Private profile checker, so we can check Steam IDs as they're entering your server to see if their profile is set to private. If somebody's profile is set to private, you can have it set up to mention these roles in your Discord, as well as send a message to a specified channel using a webhook. And here we get to the watch list for this specific server. So who do we want to mention when somebody that's on our global watch list actually tries to enter our server? We can define that role ID right here. And we can also determine which channel the message is going to be sent to, of course, using another webhook. So now the server logging section, I'm just going to blast through it real quick because all of the functionalities are exactly the same. If you want to have something reported to a specific channel, of course, you would set that feature to true. So in this case, we're doing F7 report logging. So true. And which channel do we want to send that information to by use of a webhook? Same thing goes for F1 spawns, server join, server leave, as well as server messages log, kill logs, and private messages. Now, it's important to note that if you want your private messages to be sent to a specific channel, you have to be using the private messages plugin from UMod. There's a plethora of other different private messages out there, some of them custom build, some of them private, some of them premium, but the only one that Amino is going to guarantee is going to work is the one from UMod, the free one. And that's it. You've now set up the configuration file for this specific server. So of course, we can save this file, go back to our folder, and if you have another server that you want to set up this bot for, of course, you would go into the second one and do that process all over again. Like I said before, you can have this bot monitoring as many servers as you want, providing, of course, you have the connection information available to you. You can rename these server files to whatever it is that you want so that it's a little bit more indicative of what information is actually inside that file. And then once you're done with all of that, of course, you fire up your bot, and if everything goes well, you should have a screen that looks something like this. There's not a whole lot of information to be had right here. Obviously, the important information that you're looking for is being reported to your Discord. So that is essentially UltimateRcon+. I know there's probably some features that I had to glaze over. And if this is the first time you're watching me cover any kind of a Discord bot, I understand that it might seem like I'm expecting you to know more than maybe what you do. And for that, I have to apologize. It just seems like I want to get too in depth into all of the details, and seriously going line by line. I'd love to be able to do that for you, but I'd never be able to hold anybody's attention long enough to get as much information out there as I need to. So if you have any questions whatsoever about UltimateRcon+, you can hit me up in my Discord. Link is in the video description down below. And Amino is actually a head honcho in my Discord, so you can have direct access to him too. He's probably going to hate me for saying that, but there is tons of support out there for you. So if you're getting lost or confused or whatever, or if it does seem a little bit overwhelming, because even for me, it did seem like a lot until I actually broke it down and looked at each individual line. All right, I've blabbered on for long enough. You now have enough information to decide whether you actually want to implement this for your community or not. You can head over to codefling.com. You can check out the documentation. You're going to see that everything in the documentation lines up with everything that I've said on this video. Hopefully I've linked enough information for you about using the Discord developer portal to create bots and webhooks and all of these various different things. If not, I'll put those videos down in the video description as well. Thank you all so much for watching. If you're still watching at this part of the video, you are a trooper. You made it through probably one of my longest videos. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next week.